Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a real honor to follow Cara and see her leadership in this area. And for folks who are interested, at 8 o'clock tonight, we're together in a panel conversation over at the Deutsches Technikmuseum talking more about this. So I want to start with actually 3 audio clips that came to a rapid response mechanism that my organization Witness runs, which journalists and fact checkers can share clips, images, video, audio they believe to be deepfakes, or they believe are real but are being claimed to be deepfakes, the other scenario, to be checked by media forensics experts. First clip was from Ghana. It was a politician appearing to call the voters gullible and encourage lying to them. With the input of the media forensics experts who reviewed it, it was confirmed that it was, in fact, falsified. It was synthesized with AI. The second clip was a leaked walkie-talkie conversation in which the leader of the Sudanese armed forces appeared to instruct people to target and bomb civilians. We were unable to confirm whether it was authentic or falsified because it was in Arabic and it was a walkie-talkie conversation and the detection models didn't work very well. The third example was an Indian politician who denied 2 compromising audio clips. With the input of media forensics experts, we were able to prove that at least one of them was authentic, despite his claims it was falsified. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because we're in a really messy world around how we understand deepfakes. Not even experts can always rapidly distinguish between real and synthesized and real. And of course, the ease of calling something deepfaked when it is in fact real is increasing. And to put this in context, you may be familiar with the Will Smith eating spaghetti deepfake benchmark. This is the benchmark for how good AI video is, the informal benchmark. On the left, the spaghetti is melding into Will Smith's face a couple of years ago. In the middle, it's a rather chaotic spaghetti eating scene. On the right, he's at a lovely Italian beach resort. And as of last week, or this week, with the Google VO tool, he is slurpily eating spaghetti in his kitchen. So just a reminder of the transformation of the 2 years, melding into face to joyfully eating spaghetti in his kitchen. So we have a backdrop of increasing realism and a kind of messy world in which these images are engaged with. So you may also remember the image of Pikachu running from the Turkish authorities during the repression of street protests in the last month. This image on the left is a real image. This image on the top is an AI image of Pikachu engaging the security forces. This is an AI image of Pikachu plus a bunch of superheroes and supervillains engaging the security forces. And this is an image of Pikachu running from the security forces that is an AI-generated video from an AI-generated image. And all of these were circulating all at the same time with confusion generally about which was true and false. I don't think people believe the superhero one was real, but all the other ones were attributed in confusing ways. Let me step back a bit and explain a little bit of context to who I am and what brings me to be talking about deepfakes. I lead a human rights group called Witness. We work globally with the frontline journalists, the civilians, the human rights defenders who try and document reality for accountability purposes. We work across a whole range of human rights issues, everything from land rights to climate justice, to war crimes accountability, to police and state violence across Africa, ICE raids in the US, and supporting, as we showed in those first examples, frontline human rights defenders to distinguish real from faked in the age of AI. And that is because we're increasingly in an environment where how media information is made, generated, synthesized, distributed, is AI-driven. 7 years ago, we started an initiative called Prepare, Don't Panic, which was focused on how we got a greater range of those frontline journalists, those frontline human rights defenders, to be part of the AI discussion and to shape it to their needs and demands. So since then, we've provided global training programs, we run that rapid response force I mentioned, and we participate in the direct construction of the infrastructure for detecting AI and for understanding the provenance of real information. And I should say that our main starting point in this is to ground AI conversations in existing realities. And so one existing reality that the previous talk really articulated is the existing reality of gender-based violence towards women in the public sphere and women outside the public sphere. So AI exacerbates a problem, it accelerates it, but it builds on the patterns that the human rights defenders and civil society leaders we've worked with have already identified. Similarly, in many cases, if I talk to a Syrian activist who was documenting over the past decade the abuses under President Assad, he would say every time we produce a piece of evidence, people claim it's been falsified, right? So these are not new. These are existing trends that people in marginalized positions have experienced before. So let's talk about what's actually happening with deepfakes more broadly in the environment around us. And I'm going to talk a lot around how we distinguish hype from reality, because there's been a lot of hype around deepfakes, particularly political deepfakes, since 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and arguably last year we had a lot of hype around political deepfakes, people describing this as potentially the year of the AI apocalypse. So what is actually happening? The first thing to say, and this is the problem that is at the greatest scale, and again I want to echo Cara Hunter's description here and focus, is that AI is used to target women. In every geography where we are doing our work, it is used to target women in public and private, targeting women politicians in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and a recent study from the Sunlight Project found that 1 in 6 congresswomen in the US had been targeted with non-consensual sexual deepfakes. A second area that we see very broadly is the use of AI in what you might call participatory communication. This is this idea that it has become suddenly possible to turn a metaphor, a set of words, into an image at the click of a button, right? So that might be a soft fake, like the one on the left, lionizing President Trump. It might be a solidarity image, like the one in the middle, the All Eyes on Rafah graphic that circulated to millions of people. Or it might be the image on the right, which was an image created during Hurricane Helene, that was a recent hurricane in the US, that is not a real image. It is an image that the creator said, this represents the reality, even though it's not photorealistic. And we see that all over the place. The ability of AI to represent realities as people want them to be and to create metaphor at the click of a button. The second area we see at scale is the question of AI to joke and to satirize. And here, many of us will be familiar with examples that are close to them. President Zelensky and President Trump fighting on the left, or on the right, a Russian AI parody of the notorious Trump-Gaza video. But what I want to point to in this context is that frequently, excuse me, sorry, this is, excuse me, sorry. Can you hear me clearly? Okay. That we are in a world of what's described as context slippage. We have headphone slippage, not context slippage. Okay. So I want to use an example here that illustrates this. These two images emerged during the elections in the US, and they were understood as satire. What I mean by this is that people looked at these, and they looked at them and they said, these either are intended to make a joke about the support for President Trump amongst black voters, or they're intended to disinform. They're intended to deceive people. And as they circulated, it actually became clear that these were very different. So the one on the left was created as satire, but people understood it as disinformation. So people read it as trying to deceive people when it was trying to joke. And the one on the right was created as illustration and perceived as disinformation. It was created by a right-wing creator to illustrate an article. And you see this as well, this slippage here in Germany. This example was referred to me of a video of Friedrich Merz, where it was shared originally as satire and then reshared as potentially real, in which he made a declaration to the public. And similarly, I want to come back to that AI Gaza video that depicted an image of Trump's vision of Gaza, a horrendous image of Gaza cleared to be a Mediterranean resort. Everyone thought that was created to celebrate the idea, but actually initially it was created to satirize and argue against it. So context slippage with AI is happening all the time. Let me talk about some other areas where we see AI very often in our work. Scams, AI to deceive, we've all experienced them. They occur in every geography. Politicians claiming that you should buy something, you should subscribe to something, you should buy crypto, etc. And I know there was a talk earlier today about Shrimp Jesus, the idea of AI slop. And there is a wonderful article in the outlet 404 Media where they talk about this phenomenon of creating AI video and images to generate likes and views and monetization. And they pick out a single video of a man turning into a monster in a mall, and they point out that that video has more views than the entire journalistic output of this critical whistleblowing tech journal. So this is getting huge amounts of views in order to drive monetization and likes. There is also a whole range of work in this space that is about AI being used for very mundane political communication purposes. The pioneering location in this context was India. Over the last 18 months, we've seen AI videos of Prime Minister Modi where he addresses voters by name, right? Calls you out by name in a political campaigning context. We've seen AI avatars used in the election campaign speaking in regional languages. And then in Ukraine, we have an AI spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, I'm not saying that all of this campaigning is ethical, right? And in the German context, we've also seen overt political campaigning that uses AI to represent visions of the past and visions of the future. So to use two phrases that have been used to describe the use by the AfD of AI in the German context, one is as a nostalgia machine, and the other, in their own words, is as a telescope to the future, a way to recreate the past and as a way to point to visions of what they claim the future will be like. So AI and overt political campaigning, again, with that same ability to turn metaphor into image, turn history into an image in a really accessible way. Similarly, and this is a facet of what has happened in Germany, but in many other contexts, we've seen the use of AI avatars, that is a fully synthesized face and image to spread propaganda, as well as the manipulation of real people to use their credibility and their prestige in order to share a false point. And this is not just for elections. In the German context, we are seeing some of those avatars continue to exist, like the Larissa Wagner avatar, and some of the accounts continue to share this type of information. Finally, a couple of deceptive AI contexts that are really exclusively deceptive. And I'm going to talk more in a second about what we've encountered in the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force. These are the three categories that we see quite frequently, or three of the categories. In almost all the election contexts we worked in last year, we had lip sync dubs. That's when you replace the words in someone's mouth, asking for people to skip an election, vote for a different candidate, abstain from voting. This is an example from Pakistan. We had deepfakes in which it was implied a politician knew something or had participated in something they hadn't. This is the example of Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, in which he was accused of hiding an investigation into a prominent British paedophile, Jimmy Savile. And finally, on the right, we have people identified as claiming an allegiance they don't have. This is an advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, where a deepfake was made stating that he supported Putin's goals. And this is very current, so I just thought, what is the most recent scenario in which we've seen deepfakes being widely used? And we've had the conflict between India and Pakistan in the last 2 weeks, and there you've seen exactly the same patterns of deceptive lip sync dubbing, deceptive representation of political figures saying things, and deceptive imagery. This is an area that's increasing, actually, this kind of deceptive imagery and video that shows an event that didn't happen. In this case, images of apparent Indian planes shot down in the response by the Pakistan army to India's actions. And I want to talk about a final category that we see a lot, and this is in this Deepfakes rapid response force that I mentioned at the beginning. So, as you'll recall, this is a mechanism where local journalists and fact-checkers can choose to escalate a deepfake or something that is claimed to be a deepfake but is probably real, right, to a group of media forensics experts, 30 of the world's leading experts, to get systematic analysis back on it. And what I want to point to is a category that makes up 1/3 of the media we receive in this project. It is a category where people deny real footage by claiming it is faked. And so you'll remember I mentioned the example of the Indian politician at the start who denied a piece of compromising audio. Well, when he was called out on this, what he said was, never trust an audio clip without an attributable source. And he made the argument that everyone knew how easy it was to falsify something with AI. This was the moment that a song had come out, an AI-generated song featuring Drake and The Weeknd. And he referred to that to explain how easy it was. So it's very easy for politicians and other people caught out to attribute to AI when it is not true. Here's another example. This was a video that came out just before the Ghanaian elections. It is a vice presidential candidate who was addressing a crowd in public, like a big crowd, kind of like you, and it's being filmed for TV. It's being filmed, there is someone doing sign language next to him. He said something compromising in the video. And afterwards he said, when it came out, hey, they falsified it. It's being doctored with AI. He simply dismissed it. He said, you know you can falsify anything. You know that it's possible to do this. That was doctored. And what was interesting is we took that to the AI experts on the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force, and they said, we are not going to do analysis on this. Because the point is not to do analysis, the point is to help educate the public that this would be impossible. This would be a very complex deepfake to recreate a crowd scene, to do it so compellingly. You need to talk to the public about what AI can do, not try and debunk it. So broadly speaking, what we're seeing is this kind of get out of jail card free phenomenon in which people are able to dismiss reality using the claims that AI has made it. And it happens in the US as well. We had these cases in the US elections last year. On the Republican side, dismissing photos of the rallies of Vice President Harris as falsified, and even President Trump dismissing a photo from 30 years ago as possibly AI generated that featured him meeting a woman who had accused him and found that he had been guilty of sexual assault. Now, this plays out at a more systemic level as well. This was research done by a group called ISD, where they looked at 1 million posts around AI and elections, and then did a random sample of 30 of them. And what they found is that people consistently got it wrong in understanding what was AI generated and not. Over 50% of the time, people misguessed, misattributed. What they also found was that they more often misattributed authentic content as AI generated than the reverse. So people kept thinking they were seeing AI-generated content. And they misattributed on a partisan basis. So they overguessed whether it was AI, they guessed authentic content was AI-generated, and they did that more often than not when it was a political opponent. So what I'm trying to share here is that we're in a really complex space around AI-generated media, where it touches on many of the things we already do in communication and politics, and it exacerbates, accelerates, and makes it more complicated. And I want to talk about what we can do in response to that scenario. First, some lessons learned about deceptive AI in the wild. To some extent, last year we had a big discussion about whether AI was going to shape elections. And I don't think it had one of the largest impacts. I don't think it was a categorical impact on elections. But what we saw was some fault lines. And those fault lines were around increasing use and the challenges in detection. And they were around this idea of the liar's dividend. That's this phrase to describe that third of the content where folks said, I'm going to dismiss reality because everyone thinks you can make anything with AI. So what can we do to mitigate deception and harm? Let me share a few ideas. First of all, I want to suggest telling people to look and listen harder doesn't work. So for example, just to illustrate that, Who here remembers the Pope in the puffer jacket? Okay. Which of you recognized it as AI when you first saw it? And which of you got it wrong? Okay, so I got it wrong. I spend a lot of my days looking at AI imagery, and I did not identify that was AI generated. And part of the reason was the clues for it were like the Pope has his signet ring on the wrong hand. And in the 5 seconds I watched that video or watched that image on my timeline, I didn't pay attention to that. And the research also shows that we are not good at this. There is a consistent pattern of research that shows we are not good at spotting things with our eyes, we are not good at spotting it with our ears. Let's try another example. Which of these AI video or not videos is real and which one is synthetic? Anyone for the top left being real? Top right? Real? Bottom left? Okay, oh, got some consensus there. Bottom right? No one thinks that's real. Okay, it was a trick question, obviously. They're all AI generated. But if we're looking for AI, which is another finding from the research, we tend to spot AI. So people, once they've been primed to look for AI, tend to then spot it even when it's not there. So I would strongly discourage us from these models that are about trying to spot AI. Instead, we need to focus on how do we detect and build up the capacity for detection as one solution. So I want to go back to these examples we have about detection and remind you it's a messy world. So for example, I mentioned earlier that this second audio recording was very hard to distinguish, and I want to explain some of the reasons for that. Here's a couple of cases we encountered around deceptive video and image. So this is case number 49 from the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force, where allegedly showing the Philippine president snorting cocaine. It's a clip with no audio. In this case, the Rapid Response Force was unable to confirm it since the quality was too low. What about this one? This was the video of a former Prime Minister of Ghana endorsing an opposition party. Again, they were pretty sure that it was authentic, but they couldn't reach a definitive conclusion because of issues with compression and skin tone, not represented in their training data set. Or these ones. I mentioned the example from Sudan earlier. Another example, former Prime Minister of Cambodia orders an opponent killed, and the audio leaks out. And the detectors were not effective in detecting it because they weren't designed to work with Arabic and Khmer. Or this one here. This is a really interesting case that we've grappled with a lot, which is an image, a manipulated image of President López Obrador of Mexico apparently meeting with the drug lord El Chapo. It's not real. It's a manipulated image. But the first thing that people learned about it was when that image was dropped into an online detector that said this is real. And the problem with this is that most of those online detectors get it wrong as much as they get it right. But they set the narrative about these clips. So they set the narrative that something is real or falsified on the basis of very poor technical results. So some things to take away from this. There's an increasing number of these cases. In a third of the cases, it's likely authentic and plausibly denied. Proving real is hard, and detection is flawed, frequently inconclusive, and works worst in global context. So one solution, and this is the place that I want you to think about, is how do we think about a response to deepfakes that addresses the fact that we have a deeply inequitable way we're doing it? And one place you can see that most vividly is in something we describe as the detection equity gap. So the detection equity gap is the fact that tools work well for someone trying to do it in English and probably in German, in Europe and the US, and they fail in the context where it's needed most globally. So we've been very proactively trying to address this in our work. We developed guidance to help people think about it, and we've also built out a benchmark for how to build detection that truly works, that is actually oriented towards real-world scenarios. Not only those technical constraints I just mentioned around skin tone, language, compression, media type, but also how well does a detection tool work when you have to explain it to a skeptical public? Because believe me, in most of these cases, people are skeptical. They want to believe what they already believe. They want to believe within their existing belief systems. So that the result of a detection needs to be explained in the context of skepticism. So I encourage you to take a look at this And I encourage us to take on this challenge now. And the reason we need to take on this challenge now is thinking more broadly and equitably about this detection and deception ecosystem is because we're just at the start of this, right? We're already seeing an escalation in the volume. So here I represented the increasing volume of those clips I mentioned at the beginning. We're getting more and more of these clips, and also the realism is increasing. So again, another clip that came out just this week, made with VO, the new Google tool, but the other tools will follow, which is full of fake news avatars talking about fake news.
Here are today's top news. In shocking speech, White House announces plan to replace all U.S. ambassadors with highly opinionated game show hosts for more entertaining diplomacy.
The White House unveils Truth GPT, an AI that rewrites all social media posts globally to reflect undisputed facts tremendously.
White House announces AI will now...
So in that context of the increasing realism, the increasing capacity to do this, what are we going to do? What are you going to do to make sure that we can defend against this? Thank you.